Right.
Okay. All right. Welcome. I've got my branding students here. I've got my strategy students here. Um, we are with Matt. I don't know how to pronounce your last name exactly. Georgson is how I'm going to say it. Did I do okay or did I totally screw it up? Needless to say, Matt is somebody that I don't miss his post on LinkedIn. That's where I discovered him. Those fantastic cartoons that I shared a couple examples with you. His cartoon characters like Grandma. You are in for a treat because I've seen the slide deck preview and he's got some fantastic information for us today. So Matt's has been a teacher a lot longer than I have, 15 years. He's got a PhD, so he's a real marketing professor, not like me. He's been a marketing consultant. He knows about growth, and he's going to talk a little bit about that because really that's what we are here to do as marketers. So I don't want to say any more. I want to turn the screen over to my friends Mats and let him take it from here. Mats, you're in charge.
All right. Thanks, Tom. And you hear me all right? Just give me a thumbs up if
You're
it's
good. You're good. You're good.
okay. Thanks. Hey, yeah, it's a great honor to be invited to talk to you guys. And I thought long and hard about what can I give you. So then I started packing up what I thought that I would have had use for had I been in your situation, right? And then, as it typically goes, it gets a bit dense, right? So I think that this is going to be like an hour, which frankly, I think will a little bit rock your world, like your view on marketing and your view maybe on a lot of these topics. But I think it will also require you to sort of like really be present in what I'm saying, because otherwise it won't make sense. But as I said, I wanted to sort of start like, what can I give you if I was in your situation? So I'm going to sort of just briefly tell you what I did with my pathetic life, right? And for me, it kind of started like this. When I was still in high school, I discovered advertising and I discovered the sort of strategic stuff from the 60s and 70s. I discovered David Ogilvy, Bill Barnback, all of these dudes, the madmen who had really extremely smart advertising solutions to business problems. So what happened was that I discovered this a little bit by chance, and I started reading these books on it. And the first thing, of course, was that I was just intrigued by the creativity of it all. Like they took like these things and they sort of came up with ideas that looked like really simple but powerful. And I thought, hey, I want to be in that racket, like that's like an awesome job, right? You come up with these simple ideas, they pay you millions, this is the best thing I've seen. What happened then was when I read and I actually looked at what it took to get to these solutions, I got a totally different idea because, man, these people really dug into the business of what they were doing. Because, the world was totally different back then, of course. You had no digital world. They had no feedback loops. You couldn't just sort of do experimentation, A and B study, try this a little bit, da 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 da. These guys had to go all in. They had to research their stuff and then they had to sell it into the company they worked for. And then it was all in. If they had success with their stuff, fame and fortune came, like they made literally like many millions, even more by today's standards. But if they flopped hard. So these people were extremely good at strategy. They looked at everything before they committed. And so then I became even more interested in this stuff. And I felt like, geez, this is what I want to do. This intrigues me. So I started studying like a maniac. Um, I'm Swedish, by the way, so this was in Sweden, but I did my BA in Sweden. I immediately went for going to the United States. which I believed were the best in this. So I went to Connecticut in 1992, and I started doing a master's there, and I turned into doing a PhD on the fly while working at agencies, just being like totally frantic. And the reason I'm saying all this is that, you know, I learned a lot of the theory, obviously, but I also sort of in parallel worked in practice. And then I went back to Sweden and I started working with Ericsson. So one of the first things I did when I had advanced a little bit in my career was I was actually behind the Bluetooth brand that you use every day. And also, I was the first global brand director. I set the strategy for Sony Ericsson back in the day, which was actually quite a success before it got crushed by Apple. But by then, I had moved on anyway. Because the reason I'm saying all this is that I had a journey where I realized the stuff that I'm sure Thomas has sort of talked about, that marketing and brand is much more than just working with communication. It's about designing the right offer to the right people so that they really love it and that you can grow a business from it. And back about 25 years ago, you couldn't buy consultants to help you with this. And that was a great frustration of mine because I had to sort of work very much on my own. And thus I decided to become a consultant. So I work with a lot of companies, some American as well, actually, a lot of them quite international. But the common thread in all of it is that I've tended to work with more complex businesses, not so much like, you know, selling one brand of margarine instead of another or selling a soft drink, but more the kind of things that were complicated in one way or another. And I love it. I also had a second job as a professor for 10 years at Stockholm University. So I taught classes in this kind of stuff as well, in all kinds of directions from strategy to psychology, etc. But so this is really like, you know, where I come from. One of the more weird things, as if this wasn't enough, is that I live in Brazil for personal reasons, but also professional reasons. I worked so much internationally that I feel that if you stick too long to your home country, you see everything as a consumer in your home country. You judge everything by, you know, what you see on the street, and then everything is familiar, and you tend to sort of make worse judgments. So both because it's fun, but also because it sort of challenges me, I decided to move abroad again. So I've spent most of my time the last 3 years here in Brazil, and who knows, I may well end up in the US at some point as well. So you never know. But that's the background. But once again, I asked myself, what can I give you? What would I have liked to know when I was sort of like just on the brink of stepping out of university? So here's the first one. Let me offer you some superpowers. You want some? Well, I think that the first superpower is, by now, you've had a course, you've had several courses. On paper, you're well read, probably in comparison to the average person, I think, in a company, you are probably at the sort of peak on your theoretical understanding of the subject, because you simply have had to memorize it, right? Problem is, in practice, this deteriorates very quickly. And in fact, a lot of people get by their whole lives fudging things. Because you see, sometimes I'm kind of nasty, and I just ask people in a room, like, wait a minute, can you define right now, what is a product? Would anybody want to do that right now? Or if I say to you, what's segmentation? Define to me what exactly is segmentation. And I think you kind of feel when I say this, you feel a little bit of like butterflies in the stomach, like, no, please don't ask me that, right? This is a really key problem in the business world. People fudge it every single day. It's a superpower if you understand that this is taking place. People simply do not know what they're talking about. Sounds harsh, but it's true. You see, we are almost trained today by today's society to think that you can ascribe any meaning to any word, and you are as right as the next person. It's kind of a postmodern idea. But frankly, in the business world, it leads to a heap of problems. Let me give you an example. What is a product? What is a product? Well, if you go by a layman definition up there, it's just like, well, duh, it's the thing we make. It's like the thing, like here, the Coke bottle here. That's the product, right? No, it really isn't. If you really look at true definitions, that is behind my back here, it's anything offered to a market for attention, acquisition, use, or consumption that may satisfy a want or a need. A bundle of attributes. People don't buy things, they buy what things do for them. Okay, it's easier if we synthesize. What are these guys saying with different words? Well, it's that the product really is a whole value system, like how it's packaged and sold, where it's sold, what service you get with it, what kind of risk reduction you get. You know that this is probably not going to, maybe it's not that good for you, but it's not going to contain like any weird chemicals, etc. All of it is really the product. If you buy a smartphone, you really buy something much bigger than the physical product, because you buy everything that connects to and everything you can do with it, right? Sounds self-explanatory. It really isn't, because in most companies, they fall into that layman thing because of several reasons. For one, every company has something called an SKU, right? The sort of stocking unit that has a price tag, and that's called a product. But it's actually just like the very end thing, like the physical thing that has that price tag. So people get pulled into thinking, in this kind of like naive way, that is the product. So you can think of it more like, the product really is like your entire offer. That's what you're charging for. And people don't know this. They forget it all the time. And that has a lot of consequences. Like, for instance, if people talk about product as like this very reduced thing that you can easily just replace with any similar looking good, you lose your pricing power. You lose like your ability to sell it. Like the salespeople would just like describe the object rather than the value, right? Marketing becomes cosmetic, a hunt for like, how can we sort of make something viral on TikTok that really has nothing to do with what our real value creation is, etc. So what I mean is that people in general just use words erratically in corporate settings. If you can see this and you can sort of be the smart person in the room and just say, like, before we start, can we just define what we mean by product? Right? You score points and you can get way further with the projects you are involved in than other rookies can, and you will have a superpower. You will be competitive. So this is not dull theory. It is a real world weapon, frankly. Here's another one. Customer. That also sounds like, it would be like the most easy thing in the world, right? Anyone who buys from us is a customer, right? Yeah, that's the layman thing. But the thing is that no professional should ever define words out of like an ordinary dictionary. Words should carry precision, and customers is actually like, if you take true definitions, you synthesize that, is really the one who realizes the full value of the offer, right? Because if you go with this sort of layman thing, And you are, let's say, in a company that make like, you're in JBL, you make my earbuds, right? If you go by this layman thing, sooner or later, you will be in meetings where people think that the retailers who sell these are your customers because they pay the bill, right? So you can call them customers. Then another person says that, well, their procurement officer is actually the one that signs off on the deal. So that is the real customer. And before you know it, if you work at JBL and you make earbuds, you should really worry about the consumer, shouldn't you? That they have a good experience because they are the ones that realize the full value of the offer. But you have this sort of slide into everybody's a frigging customer around you, and you sort of start treating them a bit subserviently, like, you know, the customer is always right. We're going to listen to them, blah, 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 blah. No, retailers exist for one reason only, and that is to be co-creators of a good experience for the consumer. If you can't get retailers to be your partners in that, they're bad. Don't think of them as customers. Either they're partners or they're just plain box movers, and you probably don't want that. But as I say, terminology is important because if any company with a complex chain will deal with that problem, and if you can't move away from this sort of like, you know, everybody's right in the company, calling everything and everyone a customer, the whole system becomes more stupid. So that's a second example. And I also put together just two practical examples that this is actually what is going on. Amazon, here's a positive case, you know. One day, Jeff Bezos, you know, the founder of Amazon, he realized that, you know, people talk about customer first. We have agreed that this is like our core value of Amazon, customer first. Problem is that it was effectively meaningless because people were all over the map with that. So he went in and he created an explicit mechanism, PR FAQ, which is in essence like start with the customer and then develop backwards. What should the customer experience? What do we need to do to create that experience? And customer obsession was specific decision rules, not values. Like you were not, it was not just open for interpretations that is important. It was like, you know, we expect you to make decisions on these criteria. And every team had to define, like for us right here, what is the customer? What is the customer problem we're trying to solve? What is the desired outcome? What are acceptable trade-offs to us? And by this, they launched Amazon Web Services, Marketplace, Prime, all of these new things were created by these principles. And since they could agree what words meant, they also could reduce internal fighting because they understood that these are the rules. The customer is out there and we all cooperate to create these desired outcomes. So I think it's a good real world example of why these things matter. It's not just theory. Theory has kind of a bad word almost with students, I know, because it's just like, oh, it's just like boring shit, you know. But at least go for the definitions, because the definitions contain so much leverage in actually working with people. So another example that I think is good is how Nokia sort of went under. You see, again, what is a product? And they define that, you know, we make handsets. That's the thing, you know, it's a hardware thing. We put in some software, but basically we drive it as a hardware product. But Apple, of course, just understood that it was a software ecosystem. And the hardware was more like, you know, the kind of thing that just contained the whole world that you're now so used to with your smartphones. So when Nokia defined the product erratically, like it's the thing, so they just went after like making the thing better in their terms. But Apple understood that the real product was creating like an entire ecosystem that is the stuff that you're using now, and they could then leapfrog the incumbent. So they fell, from 49% and everybody thought they were unbeatable to under 5% in just like 5 years. You guys, I can't tell you how big that is. I don't think that at that time, probably still is. Mobile phones was the single largest category in the world of products, and they had close to 50% market share. No, I mean, imagine like a car maker that would have 50% global market share. They were so big, it was almost like people said it's almost impossible for these guys to fail, right? And yet they did in just 5 years because they just had the wrong concept of what a product is. And as I say, you will encounter this on, less dramatic levels, but it will be the same kind of principle. People will be in the room talking about the wrong things because they don't really understand what the words were. So, in summary, know your shit. That's it. Because most people, frankly, don't. And this is not hard. Just go back to your textbooks, look up like the 30 most central things that you will encounter in your life, and make sure you know what they mean. And if you do that, you have an advantage. Cool? End of part one. Now we're going to talk business. Here's the thing. Most of you are oriented towards marketing, right? And I think that one of the things is that we sort of have slid out of being part of the table where the grown-ups talk business, which I think is very bad. And if I can give you some career advice on that, is never, ever lose sight of the business that you're operating in. And that means that, yes, you will probably be sitting in a team somewhere. We'll be chasing, say, conversions, and you will have to sort of show that you're driving attention and these kind of like metrics on marketing related issues. But marketing is much bigger than that. Marketing is about driving the business, and you should always be part of that. Now, you see, one of the things that I have seen that many miss is that growth is life in business. And a lot of people think that growth is more like, some kind of like grand success if we manage to grow the business a little bit. And yeah, we grew over last year. Awesome, right? The problem is that with 2024 global inflation and global growth, you have to grow 9% just to stand still. So, I mean, you can do that by getting paid better, or you can do that by more volume, of course. But I think that the thing that a lot of people don't understand is this, that, the global, so to say, par of standing still is 9%. And most companies that, in the Western world struggle to grow like that. And that is the sort of situation you're dropped into. So when we talk about success, I think it's quite interesting that a lot of people I talk to in the business world, they're sort of on the lowest level here, success one. They're sitting in a marketing team. They have a lower budget than they have market share almost, right? They don't have resources almost to hold the fort, to defend what they have. And I mean, one level of success, if you kind of understand in relation to what the resources you're dealt, is success one. Simply holding the fort with lower resources. I'm talking to you guys, you're Americans, like remember the Alamo, right? I mean, holding the fort for so long was a success in a way. Business-wise, maybe it's not so good to be obliterated in the end. I mean, you kind of succeeded in a way, but success two is gaining market share slowly at expense of competition. And this is typically where people talk about success. And probably what a lot of people would put as a sort of expectation on you guys as well. Like, if we can just wrest some market share from competition. But this is really hard. It's only 1 in 10 that actually do that consistently over 3 years. Most brands just simply stand still. It's really difficult even to pull that off. And the thing is that success 3, the real sort of rapid growth and expansion, the wow cases, are really few. Because if you believe in the thing like, okay, I think 2024 was a little bit of an exception, maybe at 9%, but maybe it's 7%. But by the law of compiled interest, I mean, you kind of rapidly have to double your size even to stand still. So the thing is that the kind of success that you actually need to achieve lays beyond what most people even think that they should be doing. And I think that this is very important, because this is what you should be prepared to talk about with your future managers and directors who are interested in, like, what can you do for the company? And you should be part of the discussion. If you think that, it's enough to just sit here and sort of toss in good marketing communications metrics, like, look, I did an ad and it did well, I mean, it's good, but they will just see you as a junior specialist who's sitting, like, doing their job there, right? If you want to sort of move, you need to move up in your own standards of what a success is. So let me talk about that. But before I get into that, let me give you one shortcut in Marcom. Tom, I believe you've talked about this, right? That maybe the first thing to know about Marcom is long versus short. You recognize this, everybody? Yeah, that you basically should balance out that you build your brand so that you can convert more effectively. The idea is basically, if you have like $1 million to spend, most companies would do better if they had like a roughly even split, or actually even more on the long side, because then the activation part, the short side, will convert up to like 4 times better. So your entire batch will be twice as effective. Here's the problem. In practice, this just doesn't happen. Here's another superpower for you. 90% chance that in your first job, you will walk out to a company that will have this split wrong, because the figures simply point in this direction. Since I come from a small country, Sweden, we were actually able to sort of map this with actual figures. And here's an interesting one. That only the blue bars here is the sort of fraction of the total media spend estimated of all of Sweden that went to long. Affinitet is affinity in the media buying business. It's basically like the kind of annoying things that is, we saw that you were kind of looking at an electric guitar, so we will like toss everything that has to do with music at you for like for an eternity. That's this cyanish color. And the yellow is just conversion, like the more aggressive promotional ads, right? And you see that in Sweden, despite everybody sort of knowing about Byron Sharp, knowing about Binet & Fields, knowing about 60/40, it's still, you see a decline that goes from like 45 to, what's this, like 35%, where if Binet & Fields are right, it should be up at 60, right? So basically what I'm saying, in practice, you will probably come to a company that doesn't even do this right. You can be a hero and just point this out, and that's that. But as I say, you can't stick with Marcom. If you really want to understand marketing at its depth and how to achieve growth, you gotta be more like into the business of it all. And then it's kind of interesting because when I talk to people, professionals, I mean, that I work with, all over categories, they say that their industry, it's really tough to grow in their industry. It's almost impossible. Everybody thinks that, you know, they have their obstacles, etc. So I show them this. It's a Boston Consulting Group report, and you basically just have to sort of see that there are green dots, which is the best companies they've observed in the business, and you have red ones that are the low achievers in that industry. So what's the takeout? You can get double-digit growth whatever you do in a given year. There are no excuses. Okay, I would probably be happier if I was in pharmaceutical and life sciences, because there is an opportunity to get like a breakthrough and get like stellar results. Banks, of course, have some kind of shady thing going there with like the best growing at 89%. But the point is more like look at the averages of the best grouping, the high growers. They achieve like these kind of wonderful 20% growth year on year. This is awesome, and that's what we should strive for, you know. And the first thing that we need to do then is just like no excuses. Everybody can sort of see high increase in revenue. And to do that, I think you should think of a concept that I sort of call rising tide, because it's just like, you know, companies basically should think more like surfers, you know. You can't totally create the waves, right? You just have to like look at the ocean and see where you see like the potential. Oh, I bet that wave is going to be good. Look at the fourth one rolling in there, right? That's the one we want to surf. Demand is a little bit like that. You have to like really look for it to be able to capitalize on it. Because I think that we as marketers are trained to sort of think in terms of zero-sum games. We have to win market share from the competition to grow. There's just so much demand out there, so we got to beat the competition. We got to take their customers in order to grow. You know what? It's actually, in terms of real money, it's actually quite false. I summarized in the white box here that, let me see, I got to point that way, that between 66 and 80%, and there are even some reports that are even higher than that, when companies make more money. So you got a company, you make $1 million more, up to from 2/3 to like 80% or more. So let's say $750,000, $700,000 is actually because more people came in to buy whatever stuff you're making for whatever reason. A rising tide. Your competitors feel it too. Everything is easier, but you get much more money on average if you somehow get this rising tide from below your feet than if you sort of have like a war with your competitors to get their revenue, right? And I think that it's kind of interesting, because don't you think that we in business just tend to focus a little bit too much on this competitive aspect when the money is in fact more about just understanding? There are people out there who have needs that maybe are not met so well. And what could we do to sort of stimulate that to sort of flow into our company? That's a way more effective way of growing business. So, rising tides, there are tons of these as well. And I just sort of started mapping these, and this is just from the sort of more current years, that there are lots of things where, for various reasons, people just started buying more from certain types of industries. And the thing is that when you go for this, you also see that about a third of it is actually not just fate either. It's companies that managed to sort of seize that something was happening, stimulating that, and then getting on top of it and harvesting this demand. So I'm really obsessed with this kind of thing. Like, how can we better detect what is coming into our shores, right? And how can we capitalize on that? And as I say, it's a much more sort of green pasture to think in these terms as a marketer than just trying to just mechanically beat somebody with having funnier TikTok, So at this point, for me, I had to do the very academic thing and do a FAFO. You know what that means?
Futz around and find out.
Exactly. It's science, man. Science. So I started looking at what is actually growth, what companies have grown tremendously. And I wrote a book on this. I believe, Tom, you gave this to.
It's in our D2L.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You
posted it
guys
on
may have read it,
D2L.
or no, you just tossed it aside, probably. But the thing was that I started looking at where has epic growth really taken place the past 10 years. And the definition is that if they grow on average at least 10% a year over a 10-year period, we sort of also even out seasonalities, and we even out, let's say, COVID effects and that kind of stuff. If you've grown consistently over 10 years, you're pretty good. So I compared the revenue in 2014 to what they have now, and it's got to be at least 160%. And then I started just looking for patterns, like what explains this? And I saw that there is very little patterns in that it's just like one industry or something like that. It's all over the map. Some things that you've obviously seen and heard about, like Netflix or Spotify or HubSpot and stuff like that. But it's also like stuff that at least I never heard of, like Auto or Datadog. I don't know what they do, or Venmo. So you see, some of it is B2B and everything. But what they have in common is all of them grew. What I want you to just park in your head for a moment, but remember, when I describe what they do, you see that it's not just a very straightforward, typical category thing like they make this, but I actually have to write out a little bit what they do for understanding. Just remember that, and I will get back to that later. Because I think that one thing that I flipped around the thought of brand here, and I started thinking, isn't it really interesting that if you think of it in normal terms, let's say, yeah, Tom, you've gone over how brands grow pretty much, right?
Yeah, we cover the some of the main points.
Yeah.
They're
So
aware
that,
of.
I mean, in essence, he says that you got to grow your mental availability and you got to grow your physical availability. And I think that far he's totally correct, right? Because if you grow like this, you gotta get people to remember you and find you correspondingly. Like, how could you grow if you don't get all these ever enlarging numbers to remember you and then find you, right? So I think that he's really got a good point in, let's demystify the whole brand thing a little bit and just take it down to the essentials. Somehow, all of these companies reach their market. And that alone is pretty friggin' interesting, because I'm telling you, all of these things that people tend to revert to when they talk about, like, yeah, but you know, real world, and I want to see results and da da da. A lot of people keep reverting to talking about, for instance, outreach, like, you know, cold calling, cold pitching, uh, sending cold emails and these kind of things, or performance marketing, like, you know, only clicks count, etc. But I challenge you, like on this list, I don't think you can see anybody who did this with aggressive outreach, like trying to aggressively get in front of their clientele and telling them, buy now, buy now. These fast growers somehow made people want to buy them. Yeah. And I think that that is about like the most compelling argument. I think that it's not so easy as to say that, you know, all you need is an enormous advertising budget and a lot of accountability, read MarTech kind of operators that sit and sort of have a lot of rigor into where they put the money and what they get in immediate results. This is not the mechanism. If we look at like the truly successful companies, it's not even close to central to what they did. So what did they do? I've talked to a lot of smart people about it, and it's kind of funny that one of the things that even smart people pull out of the hat is that they just say like, oh, it's just luck. It's survivor bias, you know, like these are the ones that made it. You don't know about the ones that didn't make it, etc. And, you know, my response is, I think that is a pretty daft way of reasoning. If I want to know why some people win marathon races, right? I want to look at the people who actually won and the people that came close. I really don't care about what number 37,856 in Boston Marathon last year did, because it's frankly irrelevant. Selection bias does exist, but you also got to keep in mind what is of interest here. I'm interested in what makes some companies apparently able to grow like this while others can. I got to study the ones that grow a lot. And if we believe that luck is the number one determinant of business, well, cool, you know, but then you guys don't need me, you don't need Tom. I mean, just roll the dice, man. But of course, it's not a good explanation. So let's just forget it. Number two that comes up a lot is tech. I bet you thought it, right? That tech is the kind of driver these days. And it's true and completely untrue at the same time. Because any business in 2025 operates on tech. I mean, there are no untechy companies anymore. Everything uses a lot of infrastructure. But I think it's a total mistake to think like, for instance, that Spotify or Airbnb or any of the others on this list really is that much of a tech company. They use tech to just implement their business model. Amazon may have started somewhere in tech, but they were a tech company in its essence when they were a startup in the 90s. Today, they're doing what everybody else is doing. It's just like their infrastructure they built is just now surpassing everything else. It's not that they are superior in tech. They've just implemented everything better than everybody else. And I think that it's a really sad misunderstanding that we explain away business success with just like this sort of thinking of the Silicon Valley unicorns, etc. And that, you know, that when you guys go out and you start working for companies, you sort of sit in companies that are totally different from tech companies and you cannot grow. It's back to that fallacy that, no, we're kind of cursed. We can't grow rapidly. There is no way out here. Tech is simply just, it permeates everything that we do. It's not an explanation. So then we get to, yeah, let me say a little bit more about that. Also, all the companies that are supposedly a tech, most of them actually fail. And the reason is because they have no market need. The thing is that tech companies tend to be really bad at reading what people actually want to pay for. So they invent things because they can be invented, and then they go bust when they run out of capital. So another thing is that the first mover advantage that a lot of people bring up when I bring this up, that's also a myth. It's dispelled. 47% of pioneers, when you look at it, were seen very early in a study to have failed, and this has just been replicated afterwards. That yes, the pioneer doesn't have that much of an advantage. Your Apples and Samsungs are Apples and Samsungs. They're not Motorola's, they're not Ericsson's or Nokia's, and it's like that all over. It's very often the fast follower that grabs it because they get better customer understanding. Like, how are we going to do this much better? And so I think that, forget the sort of myths around tech. And the thing I talked about with ads is that a lot of people think that this is about willing ad spend. And, Tom, here's like, I'm wrestling with people on LinkedIn over this as well, because they keep bringing up like, it's venture capital, it's like giveaway products, and it's like artificially high spends. Well, the thing is that free products don't build revenue anyway, so that's not the explanation. I think ads, just by looking at this, if I count very liberally, I would say that 10 out of the 150 on this list could be seen as advertising driven. But I don't even know if I would call Tesla advertising driven. Would you call it Uber advertising driven? I mean, do you think that advertising really plays like a central part in their spread and success? I don't. So I think that the kind of scary thing for us as marketers is that it really isn't advertising. Advertising is actually very peripheral to these companies' fast growth. So we got to ask ourselves, like, what does it really come from? And I think part of it is actually just rising tide. This is demand that comes from under their feet because they've understood something that other people just simply haven't understood. They're not competing almost with anybody. They're just enjoying the enormous surf that's rolling in under them. But how can you create this? Well, this is where your coursework really makes sense, right? I mean, start with the customer. They have needs and wants. They don't care what you do at the moment. Just think what they need and want. Desires and wishes and aspirations are not necessarily stuff that people will readily come out and say, but all of this is motivational forces. If you don't have this motivation going on inside people, it's going to be really hard to surf any demand, right? Because you will not convince them. You will not have a funnel where you move people from uninterested to devoted brand fans, It's just not going to happen. You have to sort of understand what they really are going to go for. And I call it demand points. From the how brands grow model that they call it category entry points. I think that is a bit problematic. Also jobs to be done. Did you cover that, Thomas?
Yeah. And we talk about that with specifically the milkshake example with our buddy Clayton, who
yeah.
So we talk about that, sure, certainly.
That's cool. That's very good. And I think jobs to be done are better, but I think that it's a little bit on the sort of explicit side that you have people that can actually elaborate on what they want to get done. I think in practice, the sort of morbid truth is like, whoever buys a Porsche is typically like aging guys like Tom and me, who kind of want to feel a bit cool, but we are not necessarily going to sort of elaborate on that in a friggin' focus group. So the thing is that you got to be careful that you don't miss like the sort of latent and implicit needs and wants. But anyway, most of those are generic. But what happens if you sort of add demand points to what is already being met out there? So let's say, I'm going to travel and I need accommodation. I need a place to sleep. And I want a really local experience. I want to be able to choose a range of price points, and I want a little sense of adventure. Maybe some hotels can offer you 2 or 3 of these, but not 4. When you have 4, you have Airbnb. So you sort of see something new when you have an actor that can give you all of this, and nobody else really gave you all of that. It will now become your shorthand to all of it, because it's kind of a mouthful to explain what our Airbnb does. So it's easier if I just say, well, have you heard of Airbnb? They get word of mouth. So I believe that, when you get demand point constellations that fulfill together a kind of meaning that makes it memorable, you have this shortcut to fast growth. And in fact, this is why I asked you to remember this stuff, that all of these are actually kind of complicated in a way. It's counterintuitive that something that would travel fast would be a bit complex conceptually. But that's the key, I think, because there isn't anything exactly like Airbnb. There isn't anything exactly like Spotify. So when we tell our friends about it, you just say, check out Spotify. You don't, and then they win. Because if you would refer to it in generic terms, you would instead have somebody just encouraging to sort of look for category generic equivalents. So these guys, I think, beat the sort of expectations and get traction in people's heads. Can I prove this? Well, here are 2 slides, just because now I'm talking in an academic setting. I got to flex a bit and tell you that this is not just Mats Georgson making this up. But first of all, you got psychology of encoding and retrieval, science basically. Goal-directed memory. Memories simply favor things that help you achieve your goals. When you know that you have a goal, you have that intrinsic motivation. You also have an incentive to remember something that is a key to unlocking that. Adaptive memory, another theory framework, that it's just survival and utility, and that is what makes you remember things. Novel and useful beats either alone. These things are novel and useful. So, here you go. You got it from psychology, why this mechanism should work this way. I think another way, in the world of cauliflower, be the strawberry. Think of a kid, a small kid just learning to speak. How do you teach the kid the word strawberry? Well, they will resist, right? It's a long, awkward word. But what if I give the kid a strawberry for the first time in their life, and they eat this sweet, big, juicy red thing? Now they have an interest. What was that? And they will listen for what the hell that was. And it's a strawberry. And they will remember strawberry because it's of utility use for them, right? I think that these brands that grow like hell achieve the same utility function. You simply want to remember them because it's like the strawberry is to the kid. You just need to remember it because it's useful. And this is funny, because linguistics work in the same way. Too bad I can't hear you guys, but I tend to ask people, like, what are the last new words that enter your vocabulary. And in English, I bet that some of the ones that you would say is doom scrolling,
That's a
brain
good one.
rot, right? What more do we have?
There's this thing called 6-7. I don't, you're
Yeah,
all
that's
using it,
very
but I'll be
sort
darned
of,
if I understand it. I don't know if
that,
my
yeah,
students
that's a
use it.
mix, okay? And why do we get these kind of odd things sort of moving into our vocabulary? Well, it's the same thing. Like you don't let it enter just because, you know, you have friends that make up words for a hobby, right? But it's a semantic necessity. I think that, you know, with brain rot or doom scrolling, I mean, we know because we've been there, right? We share the experience. We want to be able to talk about it. So now you got a semantic necessity. So it's easier if other people also are in on the phenomenon of brain rot because it's lexical economy there. Least effort. I can just say brain rot, people will nod, people understand. And it gets entrenched. So you kind of see that the brand parallel is there too. This is the way words enter our language. It's the same way that these fast growers earn their space in your mind. And generic brands that don't really add anything new simply don't get to enjoy this. So these, I think, are the sort of theoretical underpinnings on why these companies became winners. So I've talked a lot, and this was a bit academic because, hey, we're in academia. But this whole thing that brands actually, over time, when they're really strong brands, enter the sort of space where they're almost equivalent of words. Some of them do it over a long period of time, like Coca-Cola did, because they, you know, you simply know what they do and what needs they meet, what kind of demand points they need. If they're newer, you understand conceptually what they do and you want to talk about them. But all of it is that I think brands, the successful brands, enter language. And it's such a strong mechanism that I believe that you can build an entire story by not using words. You can just use brands instead. So here's some entertainment for you. I'm trying to prove a point. Yeah, I realized when you saw that the final one, I think you could guess it. is a funeral parlor. I didn't remember to change it for you guys because it's the absolutely dominant one in Sweden. But interesting too, where you have a brand with extreme penetration, but zero loyalty. People only buy once, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Anyway, oops. No. So I think to sort of sum up what I've been saying, if you're going to do a shift a little bit in your mindset, apart from the thing that definitions matter quite a lot. Like if you want to be good at what you do, you got to get your building blocks first. And also it will help you tremendously to work with co-workers when you get out and you start working. But I think that beyond the sort of know your shit level, I think it is, don't settle for modest growth and never settle for marketing as advertising and sort of showing how good you are at like pushing your advertising as a specialty. Because if you are seen as sort of like a specialist, even if you're a good specialist, but you're just sitting in your corner doing things, you're never gonna be sort of promoted into the business. You got to see marketing as an offer, the 4 Ps, being super interested in like how can we make the business better, and always like going upstream and thinking about this. Try to help people not to chase market share but create waves. Like where is demand really coming from? Because it's much more potential in understanding that and tapping that. And that requires you also to sort of shift the mindset of people. And this can be difficult in a capitalist sort of world where people don't have a lot of imagination. But it's not about static dominance. I mean, Nokia was statically dominant in their attitude, right? We're biggest and nothing is going to change much. And then bam, they died. Dynamic expansion is the thing. In fact, all of the ones that you saw on my list on the fast growers kind of break a little bit the sort of expectations that you sort of expand carefully. They're very aggressive, actually, that they're sort of getting new demand points almost quicker than they sort of secure them. But as you see, like a little bit of a process here to my right, you have a new and useful DPC means your concept becomes new and the brand becomes even more of a label for what your total offer is, which means enhanced mental availability because you want to remember it and you want to talk about it, which makes your brand even stronger, which means that you can then take the next demand point and so forth. And it's really interesting to sort of see how this breaks the kind of stagnant and more like static mindset of a lot of books. This, by the way, I think is the key weakness if you really want to grow in how brands grow, because it's really not that much about how you ever sort of explode out of anything. It's just like how you achieve static dominance. So never mind being a category leader because your category, regardless of how you define it, may be gone tomorrow. I mean, own your own destiny. Be a word, expand the meaning of that word. That's where it lays. Because as I say, growth is life. You got to deliver that. You got to understand also that this is what your CEO is thinking about all the time. So with that, that was it. That was the lecture.
Thank you. That was awesome. All right. Any questions? Or take yourself off the mute and throw them out there, or put them in the chat box.
Right. And I believe I can do this, right?
Oh, there you go. Yep. Now you can see everybody. Kevin, there you are. All right. Who's got a question? Who's got? First of all, that was fantastic. Wow, you covered so much stuff there. I hope my students remember these points. First of all, Mats will share the slides with us I'll make sure that I send that out to you, a link to the deck, as well as a link to the Epic Growth. I have so much stuff in my D2L, it's buried in there with all this other stuff. So I'll make sure you get that as well. Now that you've heard it presented, you'll know it better. So let's review because time is running fast. Everybody's bashful, Matt, as I expected. Let me see if there's anything in the chat box. Nobody's put anything in there yet. So let's go back at some of the things you shared because this was an outstanding way to end the semester. For my strategy students that are here, for the extra credit, for my branding students who are here because it's our last class, the terms we use is a superpower. So we know we're speaking of the same language about what a product is, what a customer is, what a retailer is. There's a chart in the slide deck. I want you to look that over to make sure you know every one of those terms. The importance of talking business. We've talked a lot about that. Certainly, how marketers have lost respect in boardrooms. Let's talk the language of business. Not our brands are growing, but let's talk about how we're growing the business, the bottom line, profitability. Here's one. One student just says, I got to go to work now, but thank you so much. I took lots and lots of notes. Then the next point is the importance of growing business. We know marketing is about growth. And so epic growth, the rising tides, all these concepts that Matt's introduced to us today. So people buy our stuff. And then I love this idea of the demand point constellations, where demand comes from. That's what you want to get into. And so I will also say, as time runs by, follow Matt's on LinkedIn. You saw his name in the slides there. I'll make sure it's in the D2L. You want to follow him there, and he'll be. You're cool if we ask you questions there because you're a little bashful when there's a big crowd of lots of kids. So sign up, follow Matt's, and say thank you there. Let me check.
Hey, Tom, if I may, I would really appreciate if you want to sort of write something about today's lecture on LinkedIn and tag me. It's just sort of fun to see what ripple effects that may have to sort of get interesting discussions there as well.
All right, here is the deal. I'm going to throw an extra 10 extra credit points for anybody that puts something out on LinkedIn about what you learned here. You tag me, you tag Matt's, and you get a 10 extra credit points. And I know that makes my students happy because my goal is to get everybody as close to that A that they want, that I want them to get as well. So I'll follow up on that too, Matt's. Is there any one last chance for questions before we say goodbye? Because I know at 10:45 they got to go to their next class, so they got to
Don't be
rock.
shy. I mean, ask anything.
They're shy, Matt. I warned you about this.
I'm not.
Who's got a
half
question?
as-
Somebody's got to have a question. Come on.
not
I think
half
they're
as
just blown
horrible as
away.
I-
I'm blown away, and I'm an old dude that's been around this business a long time. I started studying David Ogilvy in high school, so yeah, you talked my language, and my head's spinning. You really gave us so much good stuff today. Who's got a question or a comment or something? Somebody. See, they're bashful. They're bashful ever since the pandemic. Somebody, come on. I guess I could call your name. Here's your chance to get your question answered by Mass, who is a
And normally I
expert on
charge
growth.
like $5,000 for anything.
I
See,
put a question in the chat.
oh, great. All right, hold on. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Um, let's see here. Where is it? Hold on. I don't
Well,
see
I
it.
can just say it.
Yeah,
I was
that's cool.
asking-
I can't find it. Yeah, please say it. Thank you.
It's fine. I was just going to ask what your favorite marketing trend is right now, something that's evolving in the
Uh,
marketing world.
oh, I think one of the things that I'm really happy about is that I really see that there is a shift back now to brand building. A little bit too heavy on it being brand communications and like making brand campaigns. But that's good enough for me, frankly, because I think that is, uh, I'm happy to see the return, from that skewed distribution that I showed you. And another thing that I think is really cool, I don't know if we should call it a trend because it's an inevitability, but now that everybody's concerned with generative AI and stuff like that, and people in the future are going to be like, I just started working out. I just started like, with aerobics again. I need shoes. What should I get? Of course, these bots like ChatGPT and the gang, they will then sort of put together, depending on what you said that you need, something that they think is a very tangible, realistic, sort of true representation of the brands. This means that the brands have to be grounded more in reality again. So we get back to brands having to be built in, that there are actually substantial things going on inside the brands, which I think is great because frankly, the last 10, 15 years with all the performance marketing and stuff like that, it became very shallow and people, frankly, I think this is also a little bit of an effect of the how brands grow area, that they happily see that, products, there are no meaningful differences between product offers, they say. And I think that this is because it is a lot about the supermarket stuff, which frankly, a lot of the times we don't really care that much about. Like what brand of margarine do you use, toss up. But when it comes to actually choosing expensive sneakers, you care more. But I think that the second reason also is that if everybody plays on that note and they don't think about how to meaningfully build their brands in any direction and sort of building some truth into it, it's going to disappear. But we can't escape now with AI judgments. Is this actually better than something else for you? So brands are back, and I love it because it's going to be not just better for us marketers, it's going to be better for consumers. We're going to get better products.
I agree with that very much so. Branding is back. It's coming back. So branding students, you guys are ready to rock and roll. All right, we've reached the end of our time. As you hang up, as you leave, remember to say thank you. Remember to reach out to Mats. Mats will send me the slides. I'll send you the Epic Growth book, and I'll throw my extra 10-point offer for the LinkedIn post. That was a great session. Thanks, Mats. It was better than I even thought, and I thought it would be great. Everybody have a good day and have a wonderful rest of your week. Again, thank you so much, Mats, for your time. This was great.
Thank you so much. Great
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll send you a PDF then.
All right, man, and we'll get some participation out there on LinkedIn. Nothing gets them popping like 10 extra credit points.
No,
And so-
exactly.
Yeah, and so they are, as I warned you, they're so shy. As when there's a large crowd of people, they don't like to talk. I don't know what to do. I try everything, but since the
Yeah.
pandemic, it's been a problem. It really has. It's really tough, man. I don't know how to overcome it.
It's odd. I mean, I used to teach public speaking and stuff, and back then I thought that kids were kids. I mean, they were just like a few years younger than me. But as a European, I felt like Americans sort of seem to be so trained in being outspoken and everything. But
Yeah, it's changed, man. In the classrooms, they're afraid if I say something, what if I look stupid? What if this question that nobody has is, it's I don't know how to get past it. I try because these kids are in my capstone class. Hey, you're going to be working next semester in an office. You got to feel comfortable talking out loud.
yeah, exactly.
Anyway, dude, that was awesome, man. I will certainly write this up and thank you on LinkedIn. Your slides were outstanding, man. I love the animations, and I knew you'd kick butt. I was shocked. Nobody said, "Hey, how do you make them slides?"
yeah. Everybody asks me these things.
Yeah, they're great. Anyway, thanks, brother. We'll talk later. Again, I appreciate you doing this. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care.